My name is Pastor Hal York, and welcome to Truth in the Trenches. Today we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26, where we read this. One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. As we know, Proverbs is a book written to give us truth and insight into life, observations about life and how to live wisely to the glory of God and the good of others. So it's interesting that the subject of our neighbors is talked about 22 times in this book. So let's think about being a neighbor. A neighbor is someone who lives close to you, obviously, but they can see you. They know how you live. They see your habits, their patterns of life, how you spend your money. They see how you get along as a family, as a husband and wife. If I was to ask you about your neighbor, you could probably tell me quite a few things about them. And they no doubt could tell me quite a few things about you, even if we seldom talk. Every day happens in front of our eyes, around us, and in that circle of everyday life are people who live close by, called our neighbors. What are they learning about us? What are they seeing in us? Is it something helping them? I think this verse is talking about influence. Our lives influence others. The righteous is a guide by example, the way they live, the way they talk. We guide by example. We follow them. If they are a good guide, they will lead you down the right path. We preach with our lives. We teach with our lives. What does our life say to those who know us best, who live next door? But we also guide by our instruction. We teach and we give counsel and advice. Teach the right things, true things, things that really matter in life. We all get opportunities to talk to our neighbors, maybe just talking over the fence or maybe a coffee. They may not be your best friends. You may not consider them friends at all. But proximity means conversations will inevitably take place on some level. And when they do, information is passed on. Observations are made. Life is talked about. What's going on in the world gets talked about. Is our conversation with our neighbors guiding them into truth? Introducing them to spiritual things? Showing them a different way to look at life and the world we live in? Different in the way they probably look at it if they're not believers? Is our conversation careful not just to run down everyone and everything? Do we guide our conversations, or do those around us guide our conversations? One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor. We just are, by virtue of proximity. You may say, well, I don't want to be a guide to my neighbor. Well, you are, whether you like it or not. You live around people, and you influence those people. The righteous influence them towards godliness and righteousness, towards Christ and the gospel, towards truth. The second part of that verse is just the other side of the coin. The way of the wicked leads them astray. A guide is someone who leads. The wicked lead them astray, guides them toward the wrong path. Those who live beside wicked neighbors see bad habits, hear wrong advice, ungodly counsel. They see poor examples of family. See, Proverbs is reminding us of a very important principle. Our lives influence others, for the good or for the bad. And sadly, we live in a world where everyone wants to do their own thing with impunity. We are only responsible for ourselves, we say. No one else matters. My neighbors aren't my responsibility. I'm not my brother's keeper. But Proverbs says otherwise. The kind of neighbor we are matters. We do influence. We do guide with our example, even if we never talk to them. And we may not even know it. But can I close with another important point from this? If that is true for our neighbor, somebody who doesn't even live in our home, but just lives next door, and we can influence them for good or for bad, how much more so for those who actually live in our homes with us, our spouse, our children? Now, I say that to encourage us. We can and do have a huge impact and a very strong influence on our children. The only question is, what kind of influence is it? Is it for good or evil? Are they learning good habits or bad habits? Are they hearing helpful counsel and truth? Or are they hearing same thing that they would hear in the world? Are they learning things by watching and listening to us that will make their life harder for them when they get out on their own, or easier? Your neighbors are watching you. Your kids are watching you. And you are leading them, you are guiding them, What are they learning as they watch our lives day in and day out? They're learning something. The only question is what. I think it would be very humbling and probably scary to know how much our neighbors actually do know about us, not because they're nosy, but because they just observe. We observe them. Influencing others in our life is not an option we choose. There's no off button. We do influence people by the way we live. The only question is, what kind of influence are we? The righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. May this truth guide us and guard us in the trenches of life as we seek to live for the glory of God and the good of others. May God bless.